Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we respond to your questions on economics, political philosophy, history, current events, all those things that matter to us in our common life. Now, this is a crowd-funded and crowd-supported feature. We rely on you for the questions that we answer, and we also rely on your financial support to keep producing the videos. So please go to my website, that's www.johnrobson.ca, make a monthly Patreon pledge so that we can continue to respond to your questions, and please do continue to send them in.
All right, here's an excellent one from Laura, and I hadn't thought of it, but now that she's asking, I want to know too. Why does it take so long these days for a treaty with natives to happen? It used to take, she says, back in history, maybe hours, sometimes days. Now, that could be a bit short, granted, but why does it take forever and a half now?
That's an excellent question, to which I fear that my answer will contain many aspects of increasingly dismal nature. One of these, there was just a news story about this. The PCO has done a study of various government departments, and Indian Affairs is one of the worst for being sluggish and bureaucratic in a kind of standard problem across all governments, across all continents way. But I think it's not just that. I think this kind of culture grows up and exists in a department to some extent just because bureaucracy is like that, but also to some extent because it suits everybody's convenience to have a department into which issues vanish and never emerge to become controversial problems. Now, as to why the treaties initially took very little time to sign, and I suspect that Laura is aware of this, it is partly for a very bad reason, which is that the Indians had no bargaining power. The government would show up with a financial or sometimes a literal gun to their heads and say, here's your treaty, sign it or else. And in many cases, the Aboriginal leaders didn't want to sign the treaty, but their people were starving. They had no options. They signed it. They didn't believe that its terms would be kept, and its terms often were not kept. It is a sad and sometimes a disgraceful chapter in Canada's history, and there's no, it is not right to try and conceal this, and it wouldn't work anyway. But even if treaties should have taken longer in the past, there's no reason they should take as long as they do now. And the reason is nobody really knows what to do on this file. People are terrified of anything to do with it because everybody just about knows the current situation is intolerable. The living conditions of too many of Canada's Aboriginals, especially on reserve, is awful. Nobody likes the Indian Act, in part because it really does deprive Aboriginals of control over their own affairs. But the disagreements over what to replace it with are so profound. On the Aboriginal side, there is this really strong belief that they are in fact sovereign nations, and that the Canadian government should stop telling them what to do in any regard, how to run their schools, what their criminal law should be, how they should choose their leaders, and yet should keep giving them money. They truly believe that in some sense Canada does not exist, and one day white people will realize it too, and Canada will go away and they'll get vast quantities of land back. And this is never going to happen. White politicians, or I should say mainstream politicians, they're not all white, like to go around saying things like Miigwech and we are on unceded Algonquin land, but they don't mean it. They're just trying to avoid trouble with the radicals. They know perfectly well that Canadian law is going to continue to apply everywhere, and that whatever solution, good or bad, is found to Aboriginal affairs, it will be found within the framework of Canada's sovereignty. I mean, they can't say this out loud. They are playing a double game. They are stalling for time. They have no real idea what to do, and they wouldn't have the courage to do it if they did know what to do. So they want the process to continue endlessly with an appearance of compassion and commitment, with a great deal of taxpayers' money to avoid explosions, but no outcome. Because no outcome is conceivable to most of these treaty processes that will satisfy the Aboriginal leadership and average Canadians. So yes, they are allowing the Department of Indian Affairs to be a dysfunctional bureaucracy because it serves their interests to have essentially nothing happening. And it's incredibly frustrating for everybody. A number of Aboriginal bands are going to court trying to find some way to get resolution of these issues, even a second best resolution, because they don't like the situation in which, even if they're on the gravy train as negotiators, and frankly some of them are, even if they're doing pretty well out of the current arrangements, including the lack of accountability, they know their people are not doing well, and they know they need some kind of better solution with more certainty. But we're never going to get that until we confront this issue. Are Aboriginals, or are they not, Canadian citizens and destined to remain so? Will they or will they not be subject to the Criminal Code of Canada? Will they or will they not have, at best, something resembling municipal government status? Are they really sovereign nations capable of issuing passports? We have to confront this directly, because otherwise the process must be held to a standstill by means fair or foul. And that's what's happening right now. Nobody dares to have an outcome. And that's why the outcome is the really, really unsatisfactory status quo.
You were right. I don't like this answer one bit. It stinks. I
know.
need to go lie down. No, this is terribly depressing. And in fact, now the process has become the outcome.
Yeah, and there's a thing that a friend of mine likes to say about people who speak frankly to you. He says, when someone tells you what you want to hear, they're trying to help themselves. When someone tells you what you need to hear, they're trying to help you. And so I'm speaking partly to mainstream Canadians to say, please be aware that the politicians are playing a double game here on Aboriginal affairs that hurts Aboriginals to protect them politically. But also to Aboriginals, please give up this dream of undoing the last 300 years of history. It is never going to happen. And raking over old grievances and stirring up bitterness is bad for you personally, but it's also bad for the community because it prevents people from taking the proper path forward, which is to full citizenship and individual rights as Canadians. It may not have been the ideal outcome 300 years ago, but it is the ideal outcome today. Let us not deceive ourselves either as to what we're talking about or as to where we need to be going.
Okay, then. Thanks for that. Folks, if you would like to play along and ask your question of the professor, the URL on your screen will take you to a page where everything is explained. Thanks, and see you next time.